All right, so we are about to go into Sukkot, which is an interesting festival because it comes as sort of a crossroads between, on the one hand, being the third of the three festivals, being Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, as well as the final within what we call the Chag Tishrei, the festivals of the month of Tishrei. So in Tishrei we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot. So Sukkot is sort of where the cycles of the two realms of festivals come together. And in that vein, Sukkot has certain qualities that are both related to those three pilgrimage festivals, as well as in other ways having a lot of connections to Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And so what I'd like to do with tonight is to show a certain level of what that connection is to, but more specifically, what the lessons are from the festival of Sukkot and how we can apply them to. So if you look in the Torah reading that we read on most festivals, so it talks about each festival individually, and usually there are no festivals where there's no part of the Torah that speaks about one of the festivals. When it talks about festivals, it brings all of them together. Sometimes it's only the three pilgrimage festivals, and sometimes it's all of the festivals of the Jewish year. But in Parshat Emor, which is slap bang in the middle of the Torah, it talks about the festival of Sukkot, and it says, and you should have a festival to Hashem for 7 days a year, for all generations. Why? You should dwell in Sukkot. Now, this is the first time we see this concept of Sukkot come up as a command. You should dwell in Sukkot for 7 days. Kol Ezrach Yisrael Yeshuv Sukkot. All citizens of Israel should dwell in Sukkot. So why do we do it? So very seldom in the Torah does it say this word Laman. So we see it in the last paragraph of the second paragraph of this one. Laman Yuvu Yimechem V'Yimei B'Nechem. The word Laman means in order that you should know. In order in order that your generation should know that I placed Bnei Yisrael in Sukkot as I took them out of Mitzrayim, Ani Hashem. So that is the basic command from which we have the entire command of the mitzvah of Sukkah. So Sukkot is unusual in a sense that if you compare all the other festivals, there's one dominant theme of the festival. So if you think of Pesach, you have matzah. If you think of Rosh Hashanah, you have a shofar. If you think of Yom Kippur, I suppose you have fasting. But on Sukkot, you've got two elements. You've got on the one hand, you've got the four species, the lulav, and on the other hand, you've got the sukkah, which are independent of one another. There doesn't seem to be any natural connection between the mitzvah of lulav and the mitzvah of sukkah. But the Torah here comes and explains exactly what it is, this mitzvah of sukkah. And it is there in order that people should remember that I, Hashem, placed you in Sukkot when I left, when I took you out of Mitzrayim. So exactly what does that mean? I placed you in Sukkot. It's a very difficult concept to somehow come to a realization, this idea that I placed you in Sukkot. What do you mean Hashem placed us in Sukkot? Tell me where in the Torah, if you read through the Torah from beginning to end, where do we see that ever we were in Sukkot? It's something that at no point do we ever see such a concept. So we come out of Egypt. So you say, why do we eat matzah? He says, because the matzah, because when they left Egypt, they left in such a rush that the dough never had time to rise, and they baked it and they ate matzah. How do we know that? Because the Torah says that's exactly what happened. It is explicit in the Torah that that's what happened. When you ask about other festivals, why do we do it? So why do we blow shofar? Because it says you blow shofar on Yom HaZikaron, which is what we call Rosh Hashanah. Why do we fast on Yom Kippur? Because it says you fast on Yom Kippur. We read all about this yesterday. So then why do we sit in Sukkot? It says because Hashem put us in Sukkot when we left Egypt. But where on earth did we ever see that Hashem put us in Sukkot? So there are a couple of answers in this particular case. But first and foremost becomes quite a fascinating and well-known disagreement exactly what these Sukkot were. Because one thing is for certain, they weren't what I'm sitting in. It wasn't this metal beam structure with linen walls and schach mats on top of it. That's for certain it wasn't. So what exactly were these Sukkot? So the Torah comes, and this is brought down in the Gemara. Sukkot Shiur. So what does it mean in Sukkot? Exact verse. Sorry, I'm looking for the verse. So this becomes a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer says, Sukkot Mamish, that Hashem actually put us in Sukkot, that we, and when we left Mitzrayim, Hashem placed us in actual Sukkot. And Rabbi Akiva comes and says, no. So not that they actually placed us in Sukkot, but rather these are referring to Ananei HaKavod, that there were certain clouds of glory that Hashem put us in when we took us out of Mitzrayim. That's exactly what, sorry, let me say this again, yeah. What were these Sukkot? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ananei HaKavod. Rabbi Eliezer said these were clouds of glory. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Sukkot Mamish. No. Place us in real Sukkot. So, Ananei HaKavod, the concept of clouds of glory, is not entirely clear what that refers to. Does it refer to the fact that when we read, when Bnei Yisrael left Egypt, they had a pillar of fire that went with them at night and a pillar of cloud that went through the day and protected them? Or are these some other clouds of glory that enveloped them? Sukkot Mamash is even harder, that you say that they actually sat in Sukkot, that Hashem somehow built us structures or allowed us to build structures, not entirely clear. What does become quite interesting is that the ramifications as a result of which way we look at it. If we're going to say that the sukkahs that Bnei Yisrael sat in were these Ananei HaKavod, were these clouds of glory. So what we are saying is that when we left Mitzrayim, Hashem enveloped us in a form of divine protection that the Torah talks about as clouds of glory. And that divine protection sort of kept us going and protected us throughout our sojourn in the wilderness. So if that's the case, why do I sit in a sukkah? It says, because when I sit in a sukkah, I've also got to be, look at myself as being surrounded by clouds of glory. Clouds of glory don't necessarily mean like when you're flying through the clouds, when you're taking off, that's what you would have seen had you been there. There's this idea that there's a divine protection, that somehow surrounds you. I remember seeing once, I can't remember where it was, that someone had a sign on their door that is protected by mezuzah security. So it's this idea that Hashem protects us. And so when I leave my house, when I leave the safety and security of my house and I go into the sukkah, it's as if Hashem protects me. That's the element that's associated with it. And so what is the festival of Sukkot? The festival of Sukkot is leaving our home, going out from the warmth, coming from the security of home, out into our gardens, and understanding that what am I doing over there? I'm allowing myself to be enveloped by the divine protection. That's one element. The other element is no. When Hashem took us out of Egypt, He allowed us to build, or He placed us in these particular sukkot, in these booth-type structures. So what is the festival of Sukkot? So the festival of Sukkot then becomes no longer a philosophical experience of understanding and appreciating the divine envelopment in divine safety, but rather becomes a commemoration and a remembrance of what our ancestors did. It becomes a historical reenactment of sitting in sukkahs rather than a philosophical reality. So something very similar, for example, why do you eat matzah? So people eat matzah. So you eat matzah because they ate matzah. So when they left Mitzrayim, they never had an opportunity to rise, so they ate matzah. So why do we eat matzah? To remember what they ate. But no one would come and say that we eat matzah because the matzah is a philosophical realization of something that's happening in my life today. But that's where Sukkot is different. Because Sukkah, if you hold that there's actually these clouds of glory, we're saying that it is a philosophical statement today. But on the flip side, if you say that we actually sat in Sukkahs, then it is a historical festival. So those are the two opinions out there as to exactly why we sit in Sukkot. I want to focus on the second one, because it has enormous amount of ramifications as to the timing of Sukkot. So if we look at the festivals, so you've got Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So why are they placed chronologically in the Jewish year when they are? So why is Pesach on the 15th day of Nisan? So it's a very simple answer, because that's exactly when it happened. Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. The plague of the firstborn happened on the night of the 14th, and Alaboka, we got kicked out, and that's why we left on the morning of the 15th, and that's why we celebrate the whole thing. Sorry, Dave, I'm just going to mute you. Okay, so and that's why. So why do you celebrate Shavuot on the 6th of Sivan, 50 days later? Because that's exactly when it happened. 50 days after leaving Mitzrayim, we walked through the wilderness. This is Surat Omer, and we arrived at Mount Sinai. On the 50th day, we received the Torah. Simple. So why is Sukkot when Sukkot is? So you look at this and say, hold on. Ki Sukkot Shavti B'nai Yisrael B'Tzeit Mitzrayim, when I placed him in Sukkot. So if we're talking about the Ananai Kavod, that these sukkahs that it's referring to the clouds of glory. So if these clouds of glory, in fact, are that pillar of smoke, that pillar of fire, and that pillar of cloud that as we left Mitzrayim, so they happened as we left Mitzrayim, so we should celebrate Sukkot on the day after Pesach, or at least we say a week after Pesach, or so it should be around Pesach time. If you want to say, no, it's not that, it's celebrating the real Sukkot. So when did that happen? One thing seems to be is there's no reason to think that it happened on the 15th day, 6 months after leaving Mitzrayim. Now, it's interesting because Sukkot is exactly 6 months after Pesach. They're both on the 15th, once on the 15th day of the first month, the other's the 15th day of the 7th month. But they're both exactly 6 months apart. So why do we sit in Sukkot now? So it's not entirely clear, especially from the historical point of view. It doesn't make any sense that we be doing now, like why now? So this is a big debate between many of the latter day sages. When I say latter day, I'm talking about 1500s, 1600s. So the Torah, for instance, says that, well, Enechanami, you're right, it should be earlier in the year, it should be around April time. But the problem is, Eretz Yisrael in April is really, really warm. And if we were to have a festival of sitting in a booth outside in April, then people would look at it and say, well, he's not he's not fulfilling a mitzvah, he's just sitting outside because it's a beautiful day, he wants to enjoy the sun and some shade, and like anyone would sit in a gazebo. So in spring, you always sit in gazebos. So I said, no, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do it rather, we're going to push it off to the end, the earliest time we can do it, that it is obvious that the reason this person is sitting in the sukkah is purely because of the mitzvah to do so, and not because the weather is conducive to do so. All right, so that sort of works in many ways. Although, truth be told, if you go to Israel now, it's still in the 30s, and I think in the modern day era, it would be much better to sit inside with the air conditioning to ever sit outside in the sukkah. But that being said, that is the opinion of the two. The Vilna Gaon has another, which I think is very poignant and very profound statement. So let's go through history. We leave Mitzrayim on the 15th day of Nisan. We travel for 49 days, and on the 50th day we receive the Torah. Moshe goes up Mount Sinai. He stays up there for 40 days and 40 nights, and he comes down. Now, this Sinaitic experience that we had on Shavuot was one that elevated the Bnei Yisrael in a way that we hadn't been up until now. Up until then, this is the 49 days that we count in Surat Omer, reaching that 50th day of sublime spiritual growth. So Moshe goes up to get the Torah, and 40 days later he comes down on Yud Zayin B'Tammuz, on the 7th day of Tammuz, and golden calf, and the wheels completely fall off. From what had happened, from being on an incredibly spiritual high, enveloped within the clouds. My apologies, I just sort of got cut off there. Can anyone hear me? Hello? Dave, can you hear me? Just give me a thumbs up. Thank you. I don't know what, I just got cut off there. Sorry. Okay, so Yud Zayin B'Tammuz, on the 7th day of Tammuz, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down, build a golden calf, and this whole big mess begins. So what happens according to the Vilna Gaon, it says, that point, all the spiritual growth that we had had up until that point was dissipated within a moment. And everything that we've been working on from leaving Mitzrayim for the 50 days that we built up to Mount Sinai, receiving the Torah, is all completely destroyed. So then what happens is Moshe has to go up a second time to receive the tablets. First he has to clean up all the mess that he did on the bottom. Then he has to now go up Mount Sinai for a second time. When does he go up? He goes on Rosh Chodesh Elul, and that's why we blow the shofar for the entire month of Elul to remind us not to build another golden calf. And when does he come down the second time? So that was yesterday. Moshe comes down on Yom Kippur. And so that's why one of the reasons it's such a happy day is that this is when the Bnei Yisrael were forgiven. That's why we are forgiven on Yom Kippur, because that's when Moshe came down the second time with the second set of tablets. So says the Vilna Gaon, when Bnei Yisrael started building the Mishkan, so the Mishkan, according to most opinions, or many opinions at least, was a result to try and get Bnei Yisrael to get back to that level that they had lost since the receiving of the Torah. So he says that happened a few days after Moshe returned on Yom Kippur, and that is what the festival Sukkot comes to celebrate. It comes to celebrate not the clouds of glory that were there when we left Mitzrayim per se, but rather the clouds of glory that returned to Bnei Yisrael after being forgiven on Yom Kippur. So that is why the timing happens at this time of year. So, I mean, it works very well with the timing, and it works very well with the narrative of exactly what's happening over here. But what I'd like to focus on for the remainder of the shiur is talking about what the topic of this shiur is supposed to be, and that is discomfort as a reality of life. There's a unique halacha within Sukkot that a person who is mitztaer, a person who is in discomfort, is exempt from sitting in a sukkah. So the halacha, when it talks about Teishu b'Sukkot, you should live in a sukkah. It's Teishu kein taduru. You should live in a sukkah as you would live in your house. And if your house got to a state that you wouldn't be able to live in there, you'd move out. So, for example, if there is an insect infestation in your house, and it was so severe that you wouldn't be able to stay in your house, so you would leave. So if you're sitting in the sukkah and a swarm of bees or something comes up, so similarly you can, I see Philippa. So similarly, if you, similarly that if your sukkah becomes so uncomfortable because as a result of the bugs, so you're exempt from sitting in the sukkah, you can go inside the house. So there's this unique halacha with regards to sukkah that people who feel in discomfort don't have to sit in a sukkah. Now, this level of discomfort and how much does one have to be in discomfort to be considered discomfort, so halachically we say is sufficient that you would not stay in your home at this point. Now, the reality is we are what we call Easternists. The word Easternist is a Talmudic term which means that you, what would be the English word? It's not feeble, but it's just you're very soft, perhaps, is the word that we like the creature comforts of everyday existence, and therefore the idea of sleeping in a sukkah, let alone eating in a sukkah, is something that most of us find really uncomfortable and not desirable at all. But isn't that the whole ethic that we're supposed to be going over here? Because what is the message of Sukkot? So the message of Sukkot is one that is a little bit oblique in the supposed rejoicing of it. Where what really comes to highlight the message of Sukkot is what happens on Chol Hamoed Sukkot. So in each of the festivals, we read a Megillah. So there are 5 Megillot. So one's read on Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, and one's read on Purim, and one's read on Tisha B'Av. On Pesach, we read Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim. On Shavuot, we read the book of Ruth. And on Sukkot, we read the book of Kohelet, book of Ecclesiastes. Now, there is no more sombering book in life than that of Kohelet. Kohelet was written by King Solomon, and it was a book that was written seemingly towards the end of his life. Seemingly towards the end of his life, where he laments on a life that one would have automatically have thought was very well lived, but it has been, from his perspective, a life of consistent disappointment. And throughout the book of Kohelet, and it's an incredibly long book, I always have the displeasure of having to read it every year, only displeasure in the fact that it's 45 minutes to an hour's worth of solid reading. And the ultimate message is, life is futile. So the word is, Divrei Kohelet ben David melech Yerushalayim. This is the message of Kohelet, the son of David. So Kohelet is King Solomon. Everything is futile. A man comes, one generation comes, another generation. The world itself stays put, but everything else just comes and goes. And throughout 13 chapters, King Solomon, who was, from the Tanakh's own statement, was the wisest man to ever have lived, could see things throughout, was incredibly successful. We have not had a more successful king. We've definitely had a more pious king. We've never had a more successful king in being able to consolidate a kingdom. In fact, they say at the time of King Solomon, we didn't accept converts because, to use modern day terminology, all the converts would have become economic refugees because life was just too good to be Jewish at the time, that it was very hard to be able to judge the sincerity of people who wanted to convert. So King Solomon really was incredibly pious. And he, even though he was no David HaMelech, but he was incredibly pious. He built the temple. He consolidated the kingdoms. He brought enormous amount of wealth, prestige, and significance, not only to Bnei Yisrael as a nation, but to Bnei Yisrael as a spiritual beacon of light to the world. And we see that throughout the book of Melachim and throughout the life of Shlomo. And there, nevertheless, at the end of Shlomo's life, he sits there pondering as an old man and saying, what was it all about? Which is quite a depressing statement, and nonetheless, that you say, hold on a second here, what's it all about? Understand that, Chaim Shmerel, who doesn't have a lot to put on his resume, says, what's the word about? But yes, Shlomo, we'd all sit there and Shlomo, what are you talking about? Look how much you've achieved with your life. Look how many great accomplishments you've done. Look how many people you've influenced. Look how much you've been able to bring to the world. What a Kiddush Hashem you've been. And nevertheless, Kohelet looks at everything and says it's worthless. It's absolutely worthless. But more than the worthlessness of Shlomo and the self-doubt is the uncertainty. And this becomes one of the great messages of Kohelet, that we live in a world that we do everything in our power to try to create a level of certainty within our lives. So if you think about how we run our lives, so we try to put money away so that when we get to a certain age, we have certainty of income. We put insurances in place because we know that life can be uncertain, but within that uncertainty, can we get as much certainty as possible? We try, and this is something which is incredibly popular. I was in Bondi on the weekend, and tarot readers all over the place. I'm like, who goes to a tarot reader? What I've noticed about tarot readers because clearly, as far as their future telling skills go, somehow they weren't able to tell what the lottery numbers, because I've never seen a wealthy tarot reader. They always seem to be, operating on crates on the side of the road. Sort of, I don't know, if that doesn't convince you that they don't know what they're doing, I don't know what will. But nevertheless, you've got this whole situation where people are desperate to find the solutions to life. So it's interesting. If you go and say, what was the role of the prophet? So invariably, most of the time that we see the prophet doesn't come to tell you what's going to be in the future, even though that's the way we usually think of prophets. We think of prophets of people who are seers, people who can look into the future and tell you what's going to happen. But very seldom do we see such prophets that come. And in fact, when the prophet does come and tell us about the future, it's usually quite a bleak story. So we never say, you're going to win. The prophet never comes and says, we're going to win the lottery next week. The prophet comes and says the temple is going to be destroyed. And in the best case scenario, the prophet says, one day Mashiach is going to come. And when Mashiach comes, things will be awesome. But there's no prophecy that comes and tells you what you should be doing with your life, which is something that we struggle with. Because if we look in a rabbinic capacity, and I look how my rabbanim have been approached, and I look how people often look to concepts of rabbinic leaders. If it's not rabbinic leaders, it's gurus, whatever the case might be, that people go and they say, can you give me direction? Can you tell me what to do? Because I don't know what to do and I'm lost. And that whole concept is such an anathema to the whole process of Torah, that there is somehow a singular path that an individual has to go on. So just mute all these. So that there somehow is a singular path that everybody's got to be on in order that that they can get to the place that they need to be. Now, this idea that somehow God put you in this world for a purpose, and you have to get to that purpose, is something which might sound right, but I cannot find any source within Judaism that would suggest that such a thing is true. Because if there was a singular purpose for an individual, then somehow that individual, anytime they made a wrong decision, would never be able to achieve that purpose. So really what it comes down to is that there are opportunities and there are decisions to be made, but certainty there is not. So the idea of being able to go to someone and find absolute certainty with life and to be able to find where I should be going and what I should be doing with my life or what decision I should make in any particular case is something that just doesn't exist within Torah. Now, to take it a step further, if you go look to where these ideas are addressed in Pasha Kedoshim, which is, I suppose, in the middle of Pasha in Sefer Vayikra, in Leviticus, where it talks about this whole idea of an Oven Yidoni. So these were cultish practices that existed in Canaanite Israel. And the idea was that people could come and tell you the future. Now, there's a Torah prohibition of seeking out what they call necromancers. People do seances, witches, and the like. And the reason that these things are prohibited is because the Torah, when it comes to this, says, Tamim tiyu Hashem lelokecha. One has to be tamim. One has to be wholesome with Hashem, your God, which means not that everything will be okay. It's like, tell it a different way. There are two ways in Judaism to understand the concept of bitachon. I'm going somewhere with this, but I think everybody on this call has heard me enough to know that the tangents, you do eventually get back to the track. So the term bitachon, trust in God, can mean one of two things. So often people used to think that the concept of trust meant that if you have faith in God, everything will turn out okay. And if it hasn't turned out okay, it's because you didn't have enough faith. So there's a cute story that was asked, I think it was Rav Shmuel Salant, who was the rabbi in Jerusalem, where one of his students came up and said, Rabbi, is it true that if you have faith, if you have trust in God, that you will win the lottery, you will in fact win the lottery? So Rav Shmuel said, yes, it is true. To which the guy said, all right, so I'm going to have faith that this ticket will win me the lottery, and I'm going to daven, I'm going to pray, and I'm going to have faith that it'll win. So Rav Shmuel said, well, how much is the lottery for? So he said, I don't know, let's call it $1 million. So Shmuel said, tell you what, I will give you $900,000 cash now if you give me your ticket. And the guy thought about it for a second, and Shmuel said, you know what, it's off. He says, if you believed, if you had trust in God that ticket would win, then you would never even consider taking $900,000 today. So he says, when you have the trust, 100% that Hashem's going to bring it, is going to make it happen, so then it will happen. But you don't have that. And that is a philosophy that many have held throughout, Jewish history, that all you need is faith. If you have enough faith, well, then it will all turn out great. And if it doesn't turn out great, it's because you didn't have enough faith. That's one way of looking at things. There's another way of looking at it, which seemingly not only is much more palatable to the modern mind, but even, I think, logically makes a lot more sense. Is the idea of faith is not that it will all be okay. It's the idea that there's a driver behind the ship, that the captain is, navigating, and ultimately we'll get there. Even though we don't understand why it's taking a left here and a right there and going off course, nevertheless, we have faith, we have a bitachon, and we have trust in Hashem that there's an ultimate direction to this, rather than thinking, I know what the direction is. Now, we spoke a bit about this yesterday for those who came to this shiur on Sefer Yonah, on the book of Jonah, with this whole idea that we should stop thinking that we know how the world should operate. But this desire to have concrete evidence of what the world looks like and that it is going in a direction that we know that it's supposed to go. So that whole methodology, that whole line of thinking leads us to constant crises of faith, because we work hard on ourselves, or we daven hard, or we do mitzvah, or we do all these things, and life just doesn't go the way that we thought that it was supposed to go. And we start questioning, why is that the case? Because we think that certainty is the goal. And if certainty is the goal, then you're going to be perpetually disappointed, because life is not certain. How do we know that? Well, I'll tell you how. One way of knowing it is you read the book of Kohelet. We're going to read this on Sukkot. This is this idea that, listen, I've achieved great wealth. I have achieved great wisdom. I've conquered many cities. I've done everything. There's nothing on my bucket list that goes unchecked. And nevertheless, I sit here and I'm like, what's it all about? I still don't know if I've done right or not. And this is something which is phenomenal, is that all of us without exception, is absolutely plagued with doubt and uncertainty about where our life is, and is it on the right track, and is it going to be, and am I going to achieve the things that I could achieve? And no one is exempt from that. And one of the fascinating things of life is that we think that other people have got it together, and it's just me who can't get it together. I'm the only one who doesn't know what's happening. I'm the only one who wakes up with uncertainty. Am I on the right path? Or am I making the right decisions? Or other people, everyone else seems to get it together. It's just me who's wrapped with doubt. And something that has become evident in my own life is that the more convinced you are that somebody has it together, scratch beneath the surface, and you'll see that it's not so clear. I mean, one of the things that I read articles regularly about one of the biggest debates that is raging in social media at the moment is, are millennials narcissists? Or they're not narcissists? And everyone thinks, well, obviously they're narcissists, because what are they doing? They're posting pictures of their lunch, they're posting pictures of their holidays, they're posting pictures of what they're wearing today, or the whole world gets to see what they're doing every day. And that might, one could argue, is classical behavior of a narcissist that thinks that everybody is interested in what's happening in their life. There's another kind of person who's consistently convinced that everything that's happening in the world is revolving around them. And that's not a narcissist. That's a completely insecure individual. People with incredibly low self-esteem are convinced that the world revolves around them. They walk into a room, everybody's looking at them, everybody's talking about them, everybody's commenting on what they're wearing or how they're walking, whatever the case might be. The whole world is revolving around me. And so everybody thinks that, that I think is arrogant. Invariably, they're not arrogant at all. Everyone that I think is a narcissist is not a narcissist at all. They're complete opposite of narcissists. These are people that are so insecure that they are desperate that they can get noticed. And I thought of this. I was thinking of doing this at Rosh Hashanah drosha, but I couldn't sort of slip it into any of the droshas. But I had what I thought was a great test of whether a person is a narcissist or a person is completely insecure. So you can all vote if you agree with this definition. A narcissist is somebody who puts up what they ate for lunch on Facebook. That is a narcissist. An insecure person is a person who goes back to that post consistently to see how many likes they got and how many comments they got. If you don't go back, if you just put it up, then you're a narcissist, because you could care less. You say, I know I'm great, I put things on, and everyone goes. But if you're consistently going back to say, well, did people really like me? Did they like that smart comment I made? Or that article that I said, this is a great article, you got to read this article. Or my picture from my holiday, or my kid's wedding, or my new baby, and I keep going back, then you're not boasting. You are just looking for validation. So this is the world that we're living in. We're living in this world of perceived certainty. Unfortunately, it is a world of absolute uncertainty. And that is such a key of the book of Kohelet. Now, why do we read the book of Kohelet on the festival of Sukkot? So those who came late have no idea what I'm talking about and what this has to do with Sukkot. So I'll send you the recording. You can get the first half of the shiur. But why is it on Sukkot? Because Sukkot is a day that comes immediately, well, a few days, it's immediately after Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur, if nothing else, was a day of absolute fragility. It was a day where we sat, we stood, well, most of us, and you really looked at and tried to do a certain level of self-assessment of who am I, where have I come from, and ultimately, where am I going? And we leave Yom Kippur hopefully on quite a high that we've achieved something, that our sins have been atoned for, that the effort that we put in yesterday will not go unnoticed and will not leave us empty, that there'll be something greater that comes out of it. So how do you live with a message that is to not sweat the small stuff? To be able to look at life in a certain context, that the things that stress me out are really not that important. How do I prioritize the real things that matter in life and somehow diminish and ignore the insignificant trivialities of day-to-day existence? And that's Sukkot. Sukkot, we work hard to develop beautiful homes. And we try to manicure them in such a way that when people come over, we're proud to show, the living room, the lounge, the plasma screen, what we're showing. And then comes a time and says, no, you're not going to be inside. You're going to go outside. And you're going to have trestle tables, and you're going to fold up chairs. And a very precarious weather will determine of what the kind of meal is going to be like. Comfort will be less significant. And it might be cold, it might be hot. But what you will have there is everything that's important. And that's the message of the Sukkah. Is that the only thing that is certain is the present. We have no certainty about the future. And as we go through life, the more one can bring home that message, that the trivialities that we work to and we exhaust all of our times and efforts to try and develop, invariably are meaningless in the context of what really matters. What really matters is what's happening in the Sukkah. Life is a life of uncertainty. That will my Sukkah be standing? Will it not be standing? Will things carry on, in the trajectory? I think we spoke about this in year school. I think it's my standard year school message. If not, it's not my standard year school drosha, but my standard year school message is that the idea that we will all be here next year is something that we can never take for granted. And Sukkot is trying to, on the one hand, consistently demand of us to appreciate the uncertainty and fragility of life. But what becomes most poignant of that message is, how do we call Sukkot? So if you go through Pesach, you say, V'titin lanu Chag HaMatzot, Zman Chairutainu. It's the festival of matzah, the festival of our freedom. You say, Chag HaShavuot, Zman Matan Toratainu. It's the time of our receiving of the Torah. Chag HaSukkot is Zman Simchatainu. It's the time of our happiness. So what is happiness in Judaism? So happiness takes on a completely different term as we would ordinarily think of it in general culture. Happiness is often thought, I heard once from one of my rabbanim that he said that when I think it was his 5-year-old son said to him, he asked his son, what's the difference between joy and happiness, fun and happiness? So he said, fun is on the outside, happy is on the inside. So I think that's a good definition. But happiness in Judaism is having a relationship with Hashem. And sadness, on the other hand, is a complete absence of Hashem. We look at the saddest day in the Jewish year, it's Tisha B'Av. So why are we sad? So people say we're sad because the temple was destroyed. So that's to some degree true. But to a large degree it's not true. Because it wasn't the temple that was destroyed, it's what the destruction of the temple meant. The divorce isn't the problem. It's the fact that the love was gone in the marriage. That was the thing that made us sad. So if you look at the opposite, what is the happiness? The happiness is that we have a relationship with Hashem. We've been able to rekindle the relationship after Yom Kippur. And on Sukkot, we're able to enjoy it with those that are most important to us. Some shedding the world, shedding from us all the trivialities of day-to-day existence, being able to appreciate what's really important. And that is the uncertainty and certainty of the festival of Sukkot. Thank you, everybody. I have to get off because Ruti Kunin has her ladies' share in 2 minutes, and she needs to use the Zoom. I wish you all a Chag Samach. I wish you a good Shabbos first and a Chag Samach. And please God, we will see you over the upcoming days. Have a good evening.